Leadership is more than just what happens out there. It also is what happens right here. This hit me when my wife and I had to decide whether we would send our son to kindergarten or not. Along the process, I met Professor Chris Brownt, who specializes in the whole realm of this area, leading your kids in school. In fact, he wrote a book that I bought. It's called Ready for Kindergarten. Now I'm using it to lead my family, and I'm encouraging others to check it out. So today on the show, we're going to specialize in leading family. Now, we're going to talk about this whole area of when to send your kid to kindergarten, but it's more relevant than just that small little area. It's huge in other areas. So I hope you'll tune in and really appreciate what Dr. Chris Brownt talks about today on the show.
Welcome to Advance with Mike Acker, the podcast designed to help entrepreneurs, business leaders, and professionals alike break through barriers by improving their practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Your host is a best-selling author, executive coach, and founder of the Advance Public Speaking School and Advantage Publishing Group, two companies dedicated to providing an edge for leaders. Find out more about Mike at mikeacker.com. Now here's your host, Mike Acker.
Well, welcome, Dr. Chris. So excited to have you on the show. We're talking really about how to lead the family, specifically in regards of when to send our kids off to kindergarten. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
I really appreciate you having me here, Mike. I'm excited to talk about this topic with you.
You and I have been talking about this since before last summer.
Yep.
And we've met really somehow. We don't even know how we got really linked when we first reached out, and you came back and said, I don't know how I got that email from you, but I assure you I didn't buy your email. So somehow we got linked.
You didn't. I think I bought one of your books. That's how I think you got me.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad to connect. It's been a lot of fun. And now you have your book out there, and I read it. And then, as I've already told you, but now telling the audience, as I'm talking to my friends, I've been telling them about the book, sending the book out to them. As you know, some of them have given you some great thoughts and feedback on the book and even your writing process. So now I'm really excited to dive into this topic of, now as parents, we're not just leaders in the world around us. You're not just a leader in the college that you teach at, in the University of Austin there. You're not just, or what is the University of
Texas at Austin. Yeah.
My apologies there. And I knew that. But we're really leaders elsewhere. We're leaders of our family. And it's up to us to decide when to send our kids to school and what to do about that. So let's dive into just a couple different questions that I prepared for us today. So first of all, how can this whole issue of sending your child off to school be a challenge our decision-making process about how to best educate our child?
Well, I think one thing first recognize, Mike, is that not all families really think about this issue. They just send their kids to school because they're turned 5 and they're ready to go to kindergarten. But over the years, I have 3 daughters, and they're separated. You know, my youngest is 11, my oldest is now 19 and in college. But as they went through school, and as a former kindergarten teacher myself, and as well as the work I do, what I've noticed over the years is that more and more families are questioning whether or not to send their children to kindergarten. And there's a number of reasons that's happening. But I first want to say this before going any further is, as parents, as the leaders of your family, I want you to recognize, you know your kids best. So when you make this decision about what to do with your child, you're making it because you know your child, you know your family, you know what you want to happen across the school year with your kid as they go through kindergarten and all the way through high school, then off to college and who knows what. So that's a really important thing to remember as we talk about this today, is that you are the leader here. You know the most about your child.
And I love that. I'm gonna just interject.
Yeah.
This is so true. I work with a couple CEOs of some large companies, and they defer to the people who know that area. They're not trying to get involved in a whole different area that they don't know about. That's why they have someone in charge of that area. And likewise, don't defer as a parent to someone else who doesn't know your child the way you know your child. You lead because you know them.
And you also lead in the sense that you have a direction you want to go. So you're looking for particular things that you want your child to experience and learn as they go forward, not only in school, but in life. And what has happened is that there's a lot of stories going around what kindergarten's become, because it has changed. It's changed dramatically since I went to kindergarten, and it's changed every year, or all the times my kids entered kindergarten. 3 different times we saw 3 different kindergartens going on. There's a lot more emphasis and focus in kindergarten on academics, and that makes parents nervous. When I went to kindergarten, it was a lot of play. We went outside, we went inside, sand tables, all those things. And now in kindergarten, what you're seeing is kids, a lot of teachers are expecting their children or their students to learn how to read. And that's a big push that you see in kindergarten as well as in first grade. And we have to be really careful with that type of push and pressure on kids. So as families, as parents, we need to be able to speak back to that in a way that, this is what we want our child to have. This is the type of learning experience we want to have. And we know that they're going to become successful, but we need to do it in a way where they feel safe, supported, and nurtured.
One of the things, that this is jumping ahead from where I was
Sure.
planning on, one of the things that I thought was really interesting and really encouraging to me, especially as a high driven person, and a lot of the people who are listening to this they're driven professionals really trying to achieve something. And so sometimes we take our own drivenness and we put it onto our kids, and we worry that what happens in kindergarten is what's going to happen in 30 years. Can you
Yes.
just even speak to that a little bit?
Sure, I'm happy to. I think one thing to recognize, there is some research from a research perspective saying how kids do in kindergarten gives you some insight how they're going to progress through school. But it's not absolute, and it's kind of mixed in the sense from a research perspective. But I think as parents, we have to recognize kids grow and develop and learn in their own unique way. And they are going to have spurts that we can't anticipate. They're also going to maybe take some steps back that we never thought would happen. So as families, we just have to be there to support them as they go forward. I think one thing, and I talk about this in the book, we have this problem within our society that other researchers talk about, like Peter Johnson and Carol Dweck, is that we have this fixed mindset on learning. And I think that can really damage the way we look at our kids. What they argue for and what I argue for in the book is that we have to have a growth mindset, in the sense that kids are going to continue to grow all throughout life. And so if there's a setback or if they make a mistake, it's no big deal. We have to be there to help them to learn, to make and correct that mistake and move forward in their learning. So when you see a child at 5, you have no idea who they're going to be at 21. We think we can predict and we can control, but we really can't. I have 3 daughters who I thought were going to be different things, all different parts of their life, and they've surprised me in so many amazing ways. And as a parent and as a father, I have to be there to support them and give them the nurturing they need so that they can make the advancements that they want to make. As a 5-year-old, they don't have as much independence, but as they get older, they're going to start making a lot of decisions on their own where they want to go. And if we started at 5, giving them the confidence and the support they need to know that there's someone there to support them and push them forward, even when they make a mistake, that trajectory is going to look a lot more positive than going in a negative direction.
One of the things that really stood out to me as I was walking through the book was when you're talking about living in Texas.
Yes.
And you're in football land. And so people are talking about what's the best decision of when to send my kid to school because of football. And one of the things that you talk about that is that it's not necessarily leads to success. Can you?
Sure. There's some research that's been out there that's showing, and it's again, I refer to the research because that's what gets picked up in newspaper articles and on blogs, with kids in hockey in Canada and some kids in baseball, showing that because the way developmental leagues are set up, if you're closer to the cutoff date in terms of your age, you get picked for higher performing teams. So if you take a step back and really think about that from a leadership perspective, one, you don't know what your kid's going to be interested in. You think your kid's going to play high school football because you played high school football. That may not be the case. Your kid may become a theater kid. And so, you're trying to pressure your kid to be something that they may not want to be, and making a decision so early in their life, I think it can be really disheartening for you and problematic for the relationship you want to establish with your kid if you're already predetermining who they're going to be. From a research perspective, what's disconcerting is that we find that coaches really they make bad decisions when they pick kids for teams. They just look at physical characteristics and they don't look at talent. There were some researchers in Great Britain who looked at soccer, and what they found is with what coaches were doing, because they were picking age, they were missing so much talent from who these kids are. And so when we are parents advocating for our kids and trying to support them, be it in sports or academics, we have to help them to be able to execute and do things in a way that shows their talent, shows their success. And I just want to give a counter story. I have a good friend who has a son who grew up in Texas. And he was a young kid. He went into kindergarten when he turned 5 in August, but he was a big kid. So he was always picked for teams because he was always a large child. But by the time he got to high school, he didn't have a growth spurt. He was already where he was supposed to be. And it didn't happen that he got selected for the varsity teams because he wasn't any taller than he was when he was in 8th grade. And so that, again, is a bad choice because they aren't looking at the talent of who the kid is. They're just thinking about size, which is disheartening for me as a parent as well as a researcher. But I think when we think about trying to make this decision, getting back to your point at 5 and thinking about high school football, I think that can be, if you really step back and think about that, would we do that with anything else in our lives? Would we predict 13 years out where our kid's going to be or where we're going to be? I just don't think we can. And so we have to be really cautious. If you feel like you want to hold your kid back for other reasons, I think that makes sense. If you don't feel like they're ready to go into a whole group situation with 20 other kids, I understand that. If you feel like they could use another year to mature and become more socially engaged, I understand that. But I think if you're just thinking about football, period, you might be disappointed in a lot of different ways because you don't know where the child's going to be in 13 years.
Right. It's very interesting. There's lots of memes and books and conversations about the difference between a boss and a leader. That a leader is someone who goes forward and calls someone towards them. And a boss is someone who's behind, says, you're going to do this and you're going to do this and you're going to do this. And I think that we got to be careful as parents that we're not becoming those bosses. And we're just saying, you're going to do this. Now, right now, I've put my son in baseball, and where I live, we have the ability right now for him to be outdoors and do some outdoor stuff.
Sure.
And it's fantastic. And to be very honest, he's not extremely interested, but I'm keeping him in it because I want him to be exposed so he can decide whether he's interested in it. But I'm not pushing him and bossing him like you're gonna be a baseball star or you're gonna be a soccer star. And I think in our mindset from what I'm reading here is more of the idea of leading. What a leader does is investigates the whole scenario and plots ahead. He doesn't just say, we're doing this regardless of whether you like it or not. And that's the mentality you have in the book, is we're going to lead our family, not just boss our family.
And I think one thing to tie on with that leading idea is this idea of exposure. We want to expose kids to lots of different opportunities. And we want to do it in a way where it's fun, engaging, and exciting for them. We also, as a leader, we have to be a cheerleader. So when our kid falls or fails, we're there to help pick them up and push them forward in a way where we recognize it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to fail. We have to just think about next time we're in this situation, what can we do differently so that we can be successful? So rather than getting upset or thinking something wrong is with your child, just recognize failure is a huge part of learning, and it's a huge part of growth and development in your child, be it in school or be it on the baseball field. And so just being there to support them and encourage them to go forward, it's fine. But if you notice with your own son in a year or so, he's really not interested in baseball, you can't force it on him. Come spring, we're going to do baseball again, and he's just going to get depressed, upset, and that may damage the relationship you're trying to establish. And that's where it gets back to your boss mindset. I want you to do this. And do you really want to do that with your child? You have to really think about what is it that I want to do to help my child be excited about and go forward with and support them, because their interests are going to be different than ours. It's just part of that process.
And that's where that whole leadership comes in to play as well. And you know your child best, and you know your family dynamics best, where you can really look through. That definitely wouldn't work for me. But I do know that I have a friend who his kid wasn't interested at all, but he was so interested in that his kid eventually picked up on it.
Sure.
And grabbed a hold. And so you know your family, you know this. Now you have a lot about preparation in this. In fact, you created a preparation checklist that I thought was just fantastic, and you put it up online as well. So what are some things that people can do to prepare? I mean, we're talking about leaders here. I was just talking with a dentist today. I mean, they're very involved in preparing for the day, preparing for their situation. And so how can people prepare their family, prepare their kid for kindergarten?
So I think there's two things to recognize. One, before your child becomes 5 years old, as a parent, providing them with lots of different learning opportunities. For example, one thing is to read with your child a lot and make it fun and engaging. Read books at night. That's a really good way to have a bedtime routine. That exposes them to literacy, which is such a big deal in school. That kind of exposure is really important. I think also giving your child opportunities to interact with different adults. You may not send your child to preschool, but they should participate in some type of activity where another adult is leading them. so that they can become comfortable with being in a group situation where they don't have you to depend on as a parent, but they have someone else they can learn to become a part of, who's leading them in their learning process, be it a sport or academics of any sort. Also, it's good for kids to have the opportunity to interact with their peers, to get to know what it's like to be in a group of 10 kids and not have to do something they may not want to do. They may not be leading the activity, but their friend is, and they're able to engage and participate in that. Also, giving kids the skills and the knowledge how to take care of themselves. I know that kind of might sound silly, but when you go to school, you're in charge of yourself, and the teacher's there to help guide you, but you have 20 other kids in that classroom. So being able to do things like ask for help, know how to go down the hallway and find the bathroom, things like that are really important. But once your child becomes 5, you're going to notice within your community, a lot of schools have kindergarten welcomes or open houses. Here in Texas, we call them roundups. Sign up for those things. Go to the school, get to know what the school looks like. There's a lot of research showing participating in what they call transition activities, getting kids ready to enter kindergarten, really helps them have a successful year. And then once the kindergarten year starts, a lot of schools have a welcome to kindergarten or an open house. Try to go to that if you can. And the more you show up at school, the more you show your child you care about school, the more they're going to see that and want to participate in that environment. It's just really important to be active and engaged within it. And if you can't make those types of events, it's totally understandable depending on your work schedule. Reach out to the school though and let them know you can't be there, and see if there's things you can do. Maybe bring the child by school and show them what it looks like. This is where your classroom is going to be, things like that.
That's a good point. We were not able to, so we live in Seattle and in Alabama. We kind of snowbirds right now. And so in Alabama, we're allowed to take our kid to school. It's partly why we took up residence here. And yet with the pandemic going on last summer, we couldn't go in. So we had to do the drive-by. And I know that in Seattle, it's still like that. So depending on where you're at,
For sure.
guess is you got to be, there's not always the opportunity. So I like your suggestions there. And I like the idea of a roundup. We definitely didn't have those, but it sounds very Texas.
Okay, well, I just saw the sign yesterday driving by my kids' old elementary school. They're having it next week. So yeah, or 2 weeks from now.
Well, also part of just family leadership is building that strong connection with the school personnel. So what are some things that a parent can do to do that? And ultimately, what does that lead into? What does that create?
So I think one thing as a parent, this isn't speaking about your child specifically. I think as families, we have to recognize teachers under a lot of pressure. They have 20 to 25 different families they're working with. So when we interact with the school, there may be some time to make that connection in a way that's personable for you that you may not be used to interacting with other adults. So we have to recognize that the people we're working with are under high stress. And that can be hard, as a leader of a company, when you're working with your employees and when they're really stressed out, you have to be aware of that or you're just going to turn them off. And so when we work with our teachers, we have to recognize they're in a difficult situation in some instances and just be aware of that as we move forward. And then as we go in and work with teachers, I think the first thing we need to do as parents is to get to know them as human beings. We want to speak about our child. We want to talk about how wonderful our children are and all these things you need to know about them, but they're not going to be able to absorb that if they can't connect to you on a personal level first. So I think that's really important to make that personal connection. And then once you do that, you start sharing what you know about your child to them. And teachers really do want to know who your kids are, and they want to help support you and your child in being successful in school. So it's always thinking about, from a leadership perspective, how am I building that relationship? How are we coming together? How are we working together? And I think that'll help make the year much more successful. I worry some families go an us-them relationship. And when that happens, you're not building, your pool of knowledge around the child. You're just separating into two different camps, and it's not going to be a fun year for you or your kid. I think one thing also to recognize is, particularly if kindergarten is your first time in the school environment, there's a lot happening at the beginning of the school year for teachers. So if a teacher is slow to get back to you, it's understandable. Don't be upset. Don't take that as a turnoff. Just see that as part of the process and be persistent, but in a kind way. And if teachers know that you have their back, if they know that you're trying to be in a positive, supportive environment, they're going to reach back out to you and try to build and work together with you within that process.
I think that maybe a parallel analogy that's coming to my mind as you're talking is make sure that you're not treating your kid's teacher in any age. So if you have a kid in high school,
all the way
whatever,
up to college, sure.
as an employee. Yes. They don't work for you in that regards. Instead of work them as like a colleague or a partner that you're working alongside. and there's things that they're going to ask of you and vice versa.
Sure.
Chris, I said to the teacher, hey, just let me know if you need anything. And I was thinking about being in person.
Yeah.
And so she sent home a huge box full of paper that she needed sorted. And so my wife said, what did you sign us up for? And so there we were for a couple hours watching a movie, sorting all this paper and stapling it together. Definitely not what I intended to do. But I thought, hey, that was two of us doing it, better than Mrs. Evans doing it. And
For sure.
I'm glad that we could help.
And she's never going to forget that. I mean, as a teacher, that's something, somebody's got your back when you need them. And so if something comes up where there's a strain in that relationship between you and her, she remembers how much you care and support her, not just your child. So it's a three-way relationship, you, the child, the teacher, versus us versus them. I think that's just a really good example of how things you can do as a parent to be supportive of teachers, and teachers appreciate that in more ways than you'll ever know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she's definitely built that relationship with my wife. And that's been really cool.
Yeah.
Well, so much of this book is really helping people understand whether they're ready for that big decision of sending their kid off to kindergarten. And so you do a great job of the research in it and preparation. But what ultimately, I mean, there's so much. I mean, there's some great content. I highly encourage people picking it up. Ready for Kindergarten by Dr. Christopher Brownt. But if you were to distill this down and just do something for us right here on the show and on the podcast, what should families know in making the decision about sending their kid off to kindergarten?
Well, I think I started at the beginning of this with what I think the first and primary point is, your kid best.
Yeah.
You know how he or she learns, what he or she wants in life, how he or she reacts to different learning situations. So your kid best, him or her better than anyone else. So just be really aware of that. Secondly, if someone starts to doubt you in terms of what you're trying to accomplish in your child's life as a leader, try to figure out where that's coming from. Some families say, aren't you going to hold your kid back because they did that? And if you don't want to hold your child back, you need to be able to respond to why. These are the things I know about my kid. This is why I know they're going to be successful in school.
Yeah.
The other thing to think about within this process is to take advantage of, as I talked about earlier, those transition processes. If there's an open house, a beginning of school year thing, go there. The research really shows that's going to help your kid have a great year because they know where they're going to, what school is going to look like. And then I'm going to add a fourth here. Talk with your child about the transition. Just don't show up on the first day of kindergarten without having any kind of conversation around it. There's great books you can read about the first day of kindergarten you can find online. There's also just things like, this is what's going to happen. You're going to go to school, you're going to have a new teacher, you're going to make all these wonderful new friends, and it's going to be really exciting. The more you prep your kid for those types of transitions, as you would as a leader of a company, more you prep your employees for a transition that's going to happen, the more successful they're going to be within that situation.
Absolutely. It's very interesting watching this play out in my own life, which has been such a fun journey with you as you wrote your book and to be a part of that. As I was talking to some of my friends, they're not making the same decision we are. And it's very easy for them to say, oh, you're holding them back a year. And that kind of easily comes up for us. And now I haven't said that partly because I read the book. And so it's helped me be more receptive to people making their decisions based on what they knew. We knew we could not hold our son back anymore. Right. We knew that he needed the social life. We knew that we needed it. We knew that he was ready in so many levels and we were getting him ready. But others, they have their own reasons for it. And so maybe it's not even just about, are we ready for kindergarten, but are we ready to let other people make decisions for their kids, even though it's not the decision we've made?
Well, I think that's the definition of good leadership, is recognizing everybody has a different path, a different way they want to go forward. And if it's not affecting our immediate world, we have to be supportive of that person and recognize where they want to go with their life and their child. We have many friends. We send all our kids when they turn 5 to kindergarten. We have friends and family who decide to hold their kids back. They had different decisions they wanted to make about who their child was and how they thought they'd develop and be successful. I think you just have to be ready for any type of response you get from anyone else and be focused on what it is you want to accomplish as a leader of your family and what you want your child to experience during that school year. The research, people are going to bring studies at you. Well, this says this says that. There's counter studies for all those things. So don't get distracted by that type of stuff. just really think about who you are as a leader in your family, and think about who your child is and what they need and what you want them to have to be successful. I think you make a real good point with your son. You saw that he was ready, you sent him, and I'm sure he had a great school year. And that's just part of the process. You know, when I taught kindergarten, I had one school year where I had 5 kids born just before the cutoff date, and they were all successful because their parents wanted them to be there. They wanted them to be in school and engaged, and they were ready to have a great year.
You've talked about this several different times, that whole support aspect.
Yes.
And in the past, I actually did a video called Embrace Rejection. And I said, this is the great time for my son to be rejected because right now he's supported. And a lot of people who their parents protect them from rejection and protect them from failure, like you mentioned, and protect them from setbacks and protect them too much. Later on, they get out of that protection and they don't know what to do with rejection. They don't know what to do with failure. So I love this whole emphasis that you're talking about in terms of protection, in terms of support in the midst of all of this. Hey, we're not going to protect you from falling and all these different things. It's going to happen, but we got you.
And I think also as a parent, you have to show your child when you fail. I think seeing how you respond to failure, how you pick yourself up and move forward as a leader of your family really sets a standard that your child knows what to do next time that happens to him or her.
What if we don't fail?
Then I don't know. Are you human? I
mean, it happened about 15 years ago, but I mean,
okay.
You know.
We all have setbacks in our relationships with our family members. I mean, I'm not saying you're going to lose your job. I'm just saying, like, if something, like, for example, you're always pushing yourself to do things that are new, you're going to have setbacks within that process, and just showing your child how do you respond to that. Or if even when you're having a conversation with your wife or your partner and there's a blow up, coming back and fixing that and showing your child that you're persistent and you want to move forward in that relationship because it matters to you is going to help them see that, you know, things happen. I have a fight with my friend. I saw my dad or my mom get, you know, mend a relationship and be able to move forward. So maybe this is what I need to try and do forward so that I can be a good friend with this kid again.
I love it.
So yeah, I think failure is not a bad word. I'm not saying you should be failing all the time, but when it happens, you have to realize it happens. It's part of the learning process. It's part of the growth process. Learn from it, move forward, and let it go.
I love it. I think there's so much that you could go into that's not just obviously this book. I wanted to focus on the book, not only because I'm excited for it, and I think it would be really helpful for people as they're leading their families, but I see that there's so much that you could speak to, and just in terms of parenting and in these overall areas in life. I'm sure that you've only made about 3 mistakes in parenting. So you're
today, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, this has been fun talking about what just general ideas can you leave us with here today? Anything that this has stirred up in you that you want to leave with the audience?
Yeah, I think one, don't get distracted by any kind of conversation around school readiness that can deter you from accomplishing what you want to accomplish as a parent, as a family. Keep focused, know your family, and think about where you want to go. And the other thing I want to leave is have fun. Your child is only 5 once, and it is an amazing time because he or she is starting to absorb the world in so many different ways, and they can communicate that back to you in a way that you can really build a positive relationship with them and help them set the mindset where they see the world as an opportunity to learn and grow and take advantage of so that they can go forward and accomplish what they want to accomplish. So after the first day of kindergarten, go get ice cream, take a picture, do something fun and silly that the kids remember and enjoy, because that's a memory they're going to have for the rest of their lives. So, as a parents, we do want to be leaders, but we also want to be loving, caring people that our kids remember as they go through life, that were there for us and supported us in all these big transitions as they go forward.
I love that. I love what you're talking about here in so many areas. And it's not just relevant just to parenting. It's so relevant to our friendships and to our own lives. One of the things that you said there is do this, make the decisions with the goal that you have in mind.
Yes.
My fear is that a lot of people probably don't even have a goal in mind of what they want. So just an encouragement here is my wife and I sat down at a bookstore before our son was born, and we said, what do we want our family to stand for? And so we created a motto for our family. And so sometimes what I do, actually, we talk about this all the time, but sometimes on the way to school, if I'm the one dropping our son off, I'll say, okay, what do we do? Well, we laugh a lot. That's one of the things. We laugh a lot, and we're grateful for everything, and we're full of faith. So those are our 3 things that we do as Ackers, and our son knows it when we talk about it. because we have that picture in mind
Right.
of it. And obviously people's ideas is not going to be the same as mine.
No.
But I love what you're saying there. Like, have an idea of what you want, because it's hard to make decisions if you don't have a framework for making that decision.
Right. And you don't have to make a decision for your child 18 years out. If it's just for kindergarten, simply say, this is going to be a great year for my child at school. And how can I make sure that this kindergarten year sets a great foundation for him or her so that when she comes back next year in first grade, she's ready and excited to be in school.
I love it. I love that. Hey, this has been so helpful. It's so great. Dr. Chris, I appreciate your expertise. Thank you for sharing your book. It's ready for kindergarten. I'm actually going to be getting some of these and giving it to the kindergarten teacher so she can hand it out to different people for the school. I love what you've done here. Chris,
really
where can people,
it.
and where can people find you so that they can get connected with you if this is stirring something up?
Well, the book you can find on Amazon, and there's an author's page there under Christopher P. Brownt. My middle name's Pierce, so that's the P. I'm also on the UT website. If you just Google my name at UT Austin, it'll come up. You can get to my faculty page. My personal email is profchrispbro, profchrispbro@gmail.com, and you can get a hold of me there. But you can also get a hold of me through my UT email as well.
Great. And I'll be putting those in the show notes and on YouTube so that people can have a chance to do that and send that out to you, as well as a link to the book. But thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it too.
So today we're talking about that leading of the family, but really we're talking about over and over again on Advance with Mike Acker, this whole aspect of leadership and communication. They go hand in hand and they permeate every area of our life. So if this has been helpful to you, take a moment, subscribe, share with someone, and we'll see you on the next show.
Thanks for listening to Advance with Mike Acker, a podcast designed to provide an edge for leaders through improving practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Mike is a best-selling author and business owner who has helped many leaders increase their skills and their confidence, propelling them to new heights in their personal and professional endeavors. Join an incredible group of professionals taking the steps to become better leaders at connect.stepstoadvance.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.